Well, hello, avid readers. Trisha Goyer here, and I'm here with a new friend, Linda Dindzans, and we are talking. I love this book so much, but the book is called A Certain Man. It's biblical fiction. But before we get into that, Linda, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me. Um, I am a resident of Wisconsin. I'm a mother of three adult children, three grandchildren. My daughter had the three-peat repeat. We had a daughter and two sons, and she had a daughter and two sons. Then we have another son and his wife, and another son and his girlfriend. Um, and I started writing about 12 years ago. Originally, I was a pediatric ENT surgeon.
Oh, wow.
So
So this is a
quite the
completely different
career,
career. Yeah.
right? Yes, yes, and and quite the journey. If you had asked me 12 years ago, how long would it take me to write a book? I'd say, oh, if I work at it full time, probably about 2 years. But I had no idea. I mean, I was published in my own career, but I had no idea how much is involved in learning to write fiction, and I didn't want to just write something that I didn't feel was at the level that I wanted it to be. So it was a long journey and a lot of commitment to craft, and I still feel like I have to keep learning craft.
I have
So,
written dozens of books, and I feel like I'm always learning. I'm always
mhm,
like, how can I make this dialogue better, a description? So I love that you did that, and you're right. Learning to write fiction is like when we read it, we think, "Oh, I could do this," and then we
mhm.
try, and it's a lot of work. So the book is A Certain Man. It's biblical fiction. I would love to hear more about this journey of how you talk about, going from one career and then writing this novel. Tell us a little bit about that journey and what brought you here.
Well, towards the end of my medical career, I medicine was changing, number one, and so the whole situation for my medical practice was changing. But also, I just had a story coming to me that I
Mm.
never had time to write. It just kind of kept coming, and I wasn't even writing; it was just kind of coming in my head. And that is not this book. And in fact, what I started writing, uh, I was so naive, it grew into a trilogy because it was based in Daniel. And
Mhm.
I realized in order to write, it crosses so many generations, it would have to be a trilogy. So I wrote probably 85% of that first book, realized it was out of control, and realized I didn't know how to fix that yet. So I set it aside and then worked on this one and got something that was more controllable. So, um, that's kind of how that happened. But it was really just um, what was happening in medicine. I wanted I take a sabbatical is what I thought I was going to do. And then after about 3 months, I said to my husband, "Can this be retirement?" He said, "Absolutely, do what you want. You know, be
I
happy."
love that.
And
I love that.
he's very, very supportive. I couldn't do it without him. So,
Well, oh, I love that. Well, I will say I started reading A Certain Man, and you talk about wanting to be at a certain level. It's all right there. I mean, you feel immediately in the middle of this conflict. The dialogue's great, the tension's great. I care about these people immediately within a couple pages. So you did a really, really good job of, and I'm like, wait, she's just started writing. Like it seems like you've been doing this for 40 years. I mean, just at that level. So tell us a little bit about the story of A Certain Man, and like how you kind of just put us right in the middle of the problem of these characters.
well, I don't want to give too many spoilers, but I
Yes.
will say that the way that I got the idea was I started thinking about how Jesus told parables, and I was actually reading. I've always been a sort of an avid Bible study person
Hmm.
and loved studying the Bible, and I have facilitated some Bible studies and things too. And at one point, I came across the fact that many scholars feel that when Jesus started his teaching with those exact words, "There was a certain man," that was a signal, a very strong signal. It wasn't once upon a time. It
Mm,
was, this is going to be a true story about somebody that is living or really lived. So, I mean, what a hook.
yes.
Um, and so then I got to thinking as a writer, okay, well, what about the backstory of one of the people in these parables? Because we don't know anything about their backstory. And then I took it even the next step, which I won't give away. Um, but that's how I came up with it, and he wrote, well, I mean, I'm sorry, he taught about 7 parables, I believe, begin with that. But then I even went so far as to look into the Old Testament, and every time they used the word certain person, certain, they were talking about a real person. So I think that just adds a dimension to the scripture.
Yeah, I love that because 'cause I've never thought about that before, that he could be telling about true people, true stories. It makes complete sense, and I love that you took that and built this whole world, these whole characters around it, and it's in 1st century Samaria, during this pivotal time in history. I think that's another thing too. There's books set in Jerusalem or different places. Why did you pick Samaria for this story?
Partly because of who I wanted the characters to be,
Mhm,
but also
mhm,
partly because Jesus really cared about Samaria. We don't think about that.
yeah,
Um, but, you know, he went early in his ministry out of his way to the well at Samaria. He went back to Samaria a couple of times. One of the interesting things is when he went to the well, he stayed there for 2 days. And then when he gave the Great Commission, he said, "Take the gospel to Jerusalem, Samaria, and then the world." And when you think about it, that's the rejoining of the 12 tribes.
mhm. Yeah, because
So,
Shechem, the book starts in Shechem, and
mhm,
Shechem, when I think of Shechem, I think of the 2 brothers, Dinah's 2 brothers that went in
right,
and wiped out Shechem,
right.
but it was part of Samaria, and I love that because, yeah, there were 12 tribes, and then we have Judah is, the remaining, that we think about, but I love Jesus's heart, and he went out of his way. This was lots of
Uh,
miles out of his way to
well,
go and give the gospel.
Jerusalem and Shechem are 30 miles apart.
Yeah, by
So,
foot.
right,
Like,
by foot. Right,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right.
and so I love that, and I love that that was, your heart for these characters. Okay, Mara and Samuel, right away, there's this big moment, it's right at the beginning, like, we won't go give too many spoilers. There's this conflict, but there's this love story also. It's heart-wrenching, there's, heroes, and then there's villains right from the
Yeah,
beginning among family
right.
members and among people in the community,
Mhm,
and your heart is just like, "Oh, no. Like, this is not gonna go
mhm,
well," which again, this is what makes great fiction. Right away, there's that inciting incident that makes us care about the characters. We know kind of what's going on in the history of the time, from
mhm,
what happens to them, this marriage that's supposed to be happening, but I love how we immediately care for them. And it makes you realize how hard life was during that time.
mhm,
Um, People got to make decisions of who you marry, who you don't marry. There's so much going on. So, tell us about as much as you want to tell about their story. Kind of back cover copy type of thing to get people
uh-huh.
to know a little bit about the book.
Well, there this is Mara and Samuel are the main characters, and they're
Mhm.
separated through unforeseen circumstances, shall we say, and they go through a lot of struggles to come back together. Um, but in the midst of their struggles, then they run into people that are in the Bible. They run into John the Baptist. They run into Herod and Herodias, and they run into Joseph of Arimathea. And so my hope is that people in reading the book feel like they're there. And one of the things that's interesting to me is I honestly don't know because I'm such a rule follower. And Jesus, in many ways, was very radical. Would I have believed? Would have I
Mm.
even been interested in following him if I were in that time period? Maybe it's grace that I was born now when we have all this evidence. And, I'm kind of a Peter, I want evidence to defend the faith kind of thing. And so I want people to go back and feel, they're there. What would they have believed? Or, just even have the experience of feeling what would it have been like to be there?
Yeah, and one thing that I really love is that you have the romance, and then you have the political intrigue. There's a lot of politics that was
Oh,
going on during that time, but then there's the spiritual awakening. You talk about John the Baptist and different things like there's a new, almost a breath of wind coming in to this
mhm.
very hard life. I'm like, it's just real. It's real hard life as you're
Mm,
walking through the chapters.
right.
How did you blend that? Because I wouldn't say it's like, uh, it's not going to be your touchy feely romance that people might
Mhm.
be looking for, but that's okay because it has so many of these other elements. So how did you mesh those together?
I really think that was God thing helping me because I
Yeah.
wanted to I mean, I just the story started coming to me, and then I wanted to just make it the best story I could make it, and sometimes there were things that came to me that's like, "Where did that come from?" You know?
Hmm.
And is that meant to be in here? And so, it's just I think it's a process that just kind of unfolds and, um, learning to people talk about I remember when I was first learning to write, and I met somebody who was also from Wisconsin accidentally, and, I said something to her about, "Where's their story going?" or whatever, and she goes, "I don't know, the characters haven't told me yet." And I'm like, "Alright." Coming from a very left brain profession, I'm like, "I'm not so sure," and now I understand. But,
Yes.
at first it was like, "Okay." So, I think you just get into that, right brain thing where you start to understand. And also, I'm more naturally plot driven. I know what I kind of want them to do, or how I want things to kind of. I know, and I'm not an outliner. I'm a basic points, turning points person, and then things
Mhm.
often change. The second book I was just writing in about 3 days ago, I got an idea that just changed one of the characters' resolutions completely. So it's a process, I think. So,
It is, it's like, where did that come from? Or when
right.
there's a knock at the door. I remember one time I was writing, there's a knock at the door, and when she opened the door, it was a different person there. And I'm like, "What are you doing here? Like, why?" And then it's like your mind has to figure out why are they there? And yeah,
Right.
and I really think, I mean, we do this. Creativity is the inspiration of God. It's the breath of
It is.
God into humans, and so I love that we do this with the co-creator with God. I mean, we couldn't do any of it without Him. He's the one that came up with stories. Jesus told stories, and
Mhm.
that you talked about. So I do think those little. What about this? Those little thoughts that flint through our mind, just like
Mhm.
little whispers. I think sometimes from the Holy
Right.
Spirit.
Right. And I think, we're wired for story. I mean, that's the way
Hmm.
God created us. We're wired for story. And so, uh, we're wired to hear story and to tell story. And so it's a matter of learning how to maximize that gift, I think.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay, what kind of research went into bringing this world to life? Because you have, Herod's court, you have the streets of Judea, so many places. What kind of research did you do?
Well, it's research, but then it's constant research. I'm
Hmm.
not one of these people that researches absolutely. I mean, I researched basic, how do they eat, how daily living kind of things. But then, you find yourself in as you're writing. Like the other day, I was writing something and I had a donkey on a cart, and pulling a cart, and I wanted it to move faster. And I thought, well, wait a minute, I don't really know. I'm not a farm girl. I don't really know. Do donkeys trot? Because I've never seen a donkey move very fast at all. And so, here I am Googling, oh, yes, donkeys trot, and they actually have a natural trot, and their trot's different than a horse's trot and all that. And, so you kind of end up learning very interesting things that you didn't realize. And the other thing that I think is particular to biblical fiction, but not just biblical fiction, historical fiction too, but I am very committed to the sound of the language. Um,
Hmm.
and so I want somebody to feel like they're back there. I don't want it to be difficult to read. But sometimes by just changing word order a little bit, it makes it sound more biblical. But I'm constantly with a thesaurus because there are words you cannot use or it's anachronistic. And maybe only I know, but I think there'll be the occasional reader who knows. For instance, I can't use the word mesmerized because Mesmer was a doctor in the 1500s. So
Hmm.
somebody who knows that's gonna take them right out of the story. Um, the um, the other day I was writing something and I wanted to use the word rabble rousers, and I looked it up, and it was I've kind of committed to words that are at least have an origin. I want it to sound kind of like the King James Bible without
Hmm.
all the
Hmm.
difficulty of reading it. And so if it's after 1611, then I have to think twice about whether I'm going to use the word. And rabble rousers was like 1800, 1900. I mean, it was late. And so I thought, well, what can I substitute for that? And I ended up coming up with sowers of chaos.
I love that.
But so that's but there's a commitment to every word and trying to make things feel, sound like something doesn't take you out of the Bible. Now, some biblical fiction readers make the choice that they want to sound like the Message Bible.
Right.
They want to set it back then, but they want it to sound modern so people can relate to it. And that's one choice. But mine is that I want people to feel like they're there. So
I love
that's
that.
one of the
Yeah.
ways I do that. But it takes a lot of time and it takes
It
a lot
sounds
of
like
research.
yeah.
But
And
it's,
I love
it's
that.
fun.
And I think I'm trying to notice, I didn't notice where I wasn't flowing. You know what I mean? I wasn't
Hmm.
like, "Oh, she's writing in King James language." You know what I mean? So you did a
Right.
good job because the story just flowed to me.
Yeah.
But it felt very authentic. So I think that's your payoff is you don't want the reader to notice that you're doing these things.
Right.
It just flows naturally. And so I think you did a great
Right.
job with that.
And then the other big decision is if you're writing Jesus, you don't want him to be a two-dimensional character.
That was my
But
next question.
but on the other hand, you don't I, pray constantly and ask my early readers, please don't let me sacrifice scripture for story.
Mhm.
I don't want to do something that makes a reader think something's true that doctrinally or whatever. So I try to be very careful about that. And so I've kind of thought about Jesus in a couple of ways. One is when he is on stage. In other words, when he is in a scene where the Bible has him present, I try not to add to his words. Now,
Mhm.
there are times when I have to flesh it out. And then in this book, what I did was I had more of a almost telepathic conversation between the character and Jesus so that no one else was hearing it, but this is what she's thinking and how because
Mhm.
sometimes in some of these, um, it's 3 or 4 lines and it doesn't even flow well.
Right.
If you were just to put the straight scripture down, there's no flow. You don't even know how they got from one sentence to the next session or one question from one question to the next question. So I tried to fill that in with what the character may have been thinking to get her from one question to the next question, but still stay true to scripture. And then in other places where he's off stage, he's not things not. Then I try to make sure that he doesn't teach anything or say anything that he would not have said.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
you can fill in with people's reaction to what he just said too, so you can have a little discussion about what did he mean that fills it in. So I try to be really careful about that, but I don't want Jesus to be two-dimensional. And the other thing that happens, like in this second book, in the first book, Jesus is not there that much. There are all lots of other characters, but in the second book, he's there a lot more.
Oh, wow.
Um, and so in that instance, then I have to be really careful about what I'm doing, but I still want him to be a three-dimensional character. So,
Yeah, that's what I had like, how I the question that I had written down is how did you approach writing about Jesus and his impact on the characters without overshadowing the story? Because if you have too much, then you're like, "Well, the Bible didn't say that," and, like, it would just take your
right,
mind off of the story if
right.
you're trying to figure figure out all that. So, yeah, that was really good.
Well, and in writing the second one, I have to make sure Jesus doesn't take over the story because
Mhm.
so much he taught so much and he did so much, and it's like I have to make sure the second book stays about the characters and
Mhm.
their journey.
So, can you
So,
tell us a hint of the second book, or do you know when it's gonna be released?
the second book is going to be released in December of
Okay,
25. I
okay.
believe the date is December 9th, but I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look it up on my calendar. It might be the 13th. Anyway, but it's in December. And yes, I can give you a hint. And this one is not a spoiler. This one, the main character, well, first off, there's one carryover character from certain man. Well, there's a bunch of characters that come in again, but the one main character carryover character is in a certain man, the male, but the female character, who's totally new, is the woman caught in adultery,
Oh,
and
wow.
you find that out in the first chapter, so it's no spoiler. So,
Yeah. Oh, okay, that's so interesting, and now at least we don't have to wait very long.
yeah.
Yeah. Alright, so, is was there a particular Bible verse that shaped kinda your vision for the book, or that shaped the theme of the book?
Uh, I would just say the one parable that I don't wanna mention because
I know,
we
yeah.
wanna
Okay,
let that be a surprise, but yes,
yes. Oh, I love that.
but,
Okay. Now I know spiritual awakening also plays a huge part of the story.
mhm.
Um, talk a little bit about that because I think sometimes we forget how hard and dark things were. And then just we see crowds following Jesus. The hope that they must have felt after being in such a hard, dark place for so long, um, was you could tell it was something new, something refreshing. How did you, go about showing that in the story and with the characters?
Well, I think that part of what I tried to show is that for some, it wasn't an immediate awakening.
Mhm.
You know, for some, they met Jesus and that was like, he's the promised one, clearly.
Yeah.
And there was
Mhm.
just, it was just almost a God-given revelation to them. And for others, it was like, I don't know, what's he claiming and what's he doing? And, especially for people who heard and didn't see miracles. Um, and weren't immediately, it's not like today where we have the internet and where even your eyes can fool you. Now we have
Yeah.
AI. So that's even more worrisome. But you know, what did they hear? What did they, what about the people in Shechem when Jesus cleared the temple? I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of them may have thought he was a madman. Or they may have rejoiced. They may have thought, finally, somebody's taking down the temple and they're and going to say that Gerizim's the right place to worship. So, um, it I think it was hard to know what and I don't think obviously there were groups of people that reacted different ways. I mean, you think about the people who actually heard him teach and some of them even saw miracles, but when they felt like he was going to require something of them, like forgive your enemies or give up everything and follow me, they turned away. So,
Yeah, I love that. I love that so many people there's different journeys even within the book.
mhm, yeah,
Hold on, I got a coughing fit. Thank you,
mhm.
Andy, for editing this out right now. All right. So another question that I had was what do you hope that readers walk away with um their feeling of the gospels after putting down your novel?
I hope that they may be triggered some may be triggered to say, um, I don't what was that in there?
Mhm.
What was in there and what wasn't? And they may be triggered to go read the Gospels. Um, I had a friend who I play pickleball with who at first it sounded funny when she says, "Well, Linda, I just don't think your biblical allusions were clear enough." And I went, "Oh, can you tell me about that a little more?" And she says, "Well, I was raised in a certain denomination and we weren't taught Bible, so I didn't get it." So what she was saying was, I didn't understand it. She said, "I would love to sit down and talk about what I think I missed." So she knew she was getting it on one level, but she knew there was a deeper level. And so I said to her, "Well, most of my pickleball friends have read it, so we'll get together and have a book talk about it." And so that's an opportunity to just, talk with people about what's underneath. There are a lot of different layers in the book. So,
I love that because I mean, what better goal to have people go back to the Bible, to go
mhm,
back and read the Bible,
right.
to see these things, as the Bible shares it. So I love that, and it starts conversations. It has us think about ourselves and put ourselves in those situations. Like, what would I do in that
Mhm.
situation? So good. Okay, so how long did it take to bring a certain man from idea to finished book? You said you were working on other things for a while, but for this book, What was your time span of working on
I
it?
would say it was about 2.5 years, and the reason I say that is because it was it was a very unexpected journey, because I had been, pitching the book at places, at conferences and whatnot, and it wasn't finished yet, so, I mean, I was just doing practice pitches.
Yes.
Um, but even within the practice pitches, I was getting a lot of encouragement, but then they would say, "But we're not taking biblical fiction right now."
Mm.
And that I was hearing over and over and over again. And then I was on an online group with word weavers, and a very good friend of mine, Deborah Sprinkle, who was in the group, said, "Linda, you have got to finish this book and it's got to be published." And she really kind of believed in me, even though she writes romantic suspense. She just
Yeah.
kind of hooked into this. And so unbeknownst to me, she told her publisher about my book. And so her publisher said, "Well, okay, have her send the first 30." So I sent the first 30 pages, and a couple of days later, she emailed me and said, "Send the full." And I'm like, "She told you it wasn't finished yet, right?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah, I guess she did mention that." And so then it was a journey of, okay, do I want to go with this small publisher? And what do I want to do? And I kind of kept, that's the one verse I kept getting, was when Linda Fulkerson went so out of her way to be so uh, caring. And she invited me to an authors conference with all of her authors when I was the only one that wasn't part of the publishing house yet. And um, I kept getting the verse, do not be, what is it? Don't be disdainful of small beginnings.
Mhm.
And don't. And I thought, and I, I was praying about it. It was like, it could take how many years to get published with a big publisher, and meanwhile this is almost done. The big problem with this one was that biblical fiction a few years back was 140,000 words.
Right.
Now they want Angela Hunt to write 90,
Mhm, mhm.
even though she's going to sell immediately no matter how many words she has, or Misu Andrews, all of those people. um, so I had a huge cut, and that the cut took a long time.
Mhm.
So this one I'm trying to write forward in a more judicious fashion so that I don't overwrite the word count. So
Yeah, because we don't think of things like printing costs to print books
right,
and all those other factors.
right, right. Well,
Yeah,
and
but
also, I mean, the publishers say that the attention span has just gotten,
mhm.
people are wanting novellas, people are wanting shorter chapters so they can just read a little bit before they go to sleep. I mean, for your avid reader audience and for me, that doesn't matter. I mean, we
Right.
read, you know,
Yeah.
past our bedtime is what we do,
Yes.
but not everybody does. So,
That's so true. That's a good point, yeah, and I love Linda. I think she moved recently, but I'm in Arkansas, and she lived, like, an hour from me, so we'd be
uh-huh.
able to
Oh,
catch each other here and there,
uh-huh.
and she's
Yeah.
just a great, great person, and I do
Yeah.
think having those people in your court, cheering you on, helping you, it is such an asset. It really, makes a big difference, and I've been published with big publishers and small publishers, and you could either
Mhm.
be a little tiny minnow in a big pond, or you could be
Mhm.
a regular sized fish in a little pond. So,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
sometimes it is really good. And the quality of the book, the cover is beautiful.
Well,
The
that's
I
Linda.
don't know about the editing, everything, like, I would have, you know, I think they've done a wonderful, fantastic job with it.
Well,
So,
thank you so
yeah.
much.
Yeah. All right, last question. If you could sit down and have dinner with any one of your characters from the book, who would it be, and then what would you talk about?
I know there are a couple of
You
different
can't say
characters.
Jesus. You can't say Jesus, though.
No, um, I think it might actually be Herodias, because
Hmm.
I would like to know what was in that woman's mind. I mean, she was powerful. She was, Machiavellian. I mean, but on the other hand, she was a mother. I mean, what was in her mind, when she sent Salome out to dance? Uh, you know, what was her? My the way I envision her, she was threatened too. I mean, Herod was
Mhm.
no easy husband, um,
Right.
but yet she chose to go after him. So I think she would be someone interesting to talk with. Um, but I also think that the main character Mara
Mhm.
would would be interesting, um, and things that we don't know about her. Or I think that sometimes we have a preconceived notion about some of these people um, in the Bible. And like, for instance, the book that I'm writing now, The Woman Taken in Adultery. I mean, everybody just kind of assumes, oh, she was an evil woman. Well, where was the man?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, something's missing there. There's a big point in that story that's missing. And
They caught her in the act. She wasn't
right,
alone.
right, right. And so, and so that's the whole stimulus for that story. And, what would make someone choose that? And so
Very
it's,
cool. I love both those answers. I love that's like that conversation with Herodias would be kind of scary. I mean, like,
oh,
what
yeah,
would you say? And then Mara is like, okay. Like, I
yeah.
was expecting you to say Mara, but I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. I love that.
Well, I think I like writing villainesses because I think that most villains or villainesses are more complicated than just they're evil. I mean, they had
Hmm.
a journey to get there. I mean, yes, they chose it, but what made them, it's the whole hurt thing. Hurt people hurt people. Well, what were their hurts and how could they be turned around?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so good. Okay, so the book is A Certain Man. Linda, where can people go to find more information about you and this novel, and then your upcoming novel too?
Well, they can go to Amazon to get the book. And then I have a website, lindadindzans.com, and it's up and running, but I'm kind of going to have to work on it a little more. That was the one big surprise in having a book come out, is that I had no idea how much social media and everything else. I'm a complete newbie at it and learning. And I keep telling myself I get to learn social media, not I have to learn social media.
Yes.
And so I think, but that's something that once this second book is turned in, I'm going to be working on my website and getting it to be more user friendly. Well, it's user friendly right now, but just to make it more informative.
Yeah. I 100 years ago, they just wrote a book and didn't have to worry about social media or websites or even when I first started 35 years ago, we were just starting to get websites up there. So,
Right.
yeah, it's a new thing, but we do get to connect with people. They have easy access to just tell us how much they enjoy our books, and
Hmm.
so it's like just building a whole bunch of friends, community of friends. But yeah, I love that you know, you getting the website going, social media going, but your heart is really with the writing, and I think it really
Hmm.
shows in A Certain Man.
Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you so much for being here today, Linda.